There is no glory in the first step of war. Before the golden eagles, before the generals with laurel crowns, there was silence and fear. On the furthest edge of the battlefield, where no one wanted to stand, there were men without names. They had no shining armor, no promises of triumph. They were thrown forward like bait, like flesh to test the enemy's hatred. Rome never sang of them. No senator ever spoke their deeds. Yet it was they who carved the path with their own bodies, stepping through mud mixed with blood, seconds before the legions clashed. When the enemy charged with fury, it was upon them that the storm first fell. They were called Velites, the soldiers Rome used and forgot. Today, you will not hear about heroes. You will meet the ghosts who held an empire on their shoulders and who died without applause, without burial, without history. If this truth has already stirred something inside you, then do not let these names remain in silence. Every like, every subscription is an act of justice for Rome's forgotten. Show the algorithm that there are still stories worthy of being remembered. Strengthen this legion, because only together can we bring to light those who died without a voice. Hit the like button, subscribe now, and march with us to rescue what history tried to bury. Rome was not always the invincible colossus the world fears in history books. There was a time when her walls trembled, her legions hesitated, and her enemies struck the gates with savagery. It began after the humiliation before the Gauls in the devastating Battle of the Allia River, when the Eternal City was sacked and Rome tasted the bitter flavor of helplessness. In that dark age, the Romans realized that the brute strength of the phalanx, inherited from the Greeks, was no longer enough. It was slow, rigid, predictable. The enemy had changed. Rome needed to change. And so, in the midst of fear and urgency, they emerged, the disposable warriors. Poor youths, swift without armor, sent not to win, but to delay defeat. There was born a class of soldiers unlike anything Rome had ever used, the Vélites. They did not fight for glory. They fought for survival. And unknowingly, they were about to rewrite how Rome would wage war forever. To many, the Vélites were just a footnote, but their origin marks a rupture in Rome's military history. After the tragedy with the Gauls and the endless siege of Veii, one man rose as a reformer, Marcus Furius Camillus. He understood that an army made only of human walls and heavy spears was doomed. Rome needed movement. Rome needed eyes in the darkness. Rome needed soldiers capable of provoking chaos and vanishing. Thus came the first great break in the legion, abandoning the compact phalanx and creating flexible combat lines. Behind would come the hastati, then the veteran principes, and finally the war-scarred triarii. But ahead of them all, something new, something wild. The Velites, light skirmishers, created to run before the heavy infantry advanced. They were not shields, they were bait. They were placed at the most fragile point of the field, where life lasted only the time it took for a javelin to fly. Rome gave them no honor, but gave them a role no one else could bear, to feel the first impact of the enemy. Today, you know them as disposable. Soon you will understand why even generals feared to stand where they stood. When a legion advanced, it was not the golden shields that met the enemy. It was the bare feet of the Velites. Before the roar of battle, they were already there, breathing fear, feeling the earth tremble. Their mission was simple and cruel: provoke chaos and survive the impossible. Armed only with a small shield, palma, a short sword, and 7 lethal javelins called veruta, they ran ahead of the army. Not to win, but to weaken. They rained javelins, breaking enemy formations, cracking their morale. And then they disappeared. Unlike other armies which, abandoned their skirmishes to fate, the Velites retreated through gaps carefully opened in the Roman lines, a deadly corridor designed to swallow them back into safety. It was a dance between life and death. Strike, retreat, breathe, and perhaps never return. No medals, no recorded names. Only the dull sound of bodies left behind as the legion marched on. They were not part of glory. They were part of the mechanism. The Vélites were not born among the nobles. They did not march beneath marble statues. They were young men from Rome's lowest ranks, farmers, sons of craftsmen, men with no wealth, no gold for armor, no right to glory. For many, the army was their only chance to exist, not to live, to exist. While the Hastati carried broad shields and the Principes wore bronze cuirasses, the Velites had only the bare minimum, a small round shield, armor, unable to stop a spear. A simple helmet, sometimes covered with a wolf pelt, not for intimidation, but so they could be recognized when dead. A short sword and 7 fragile javelins, nothing more. Rome placed them at the front, not for bravery, but because they held no value. They were numerous, strategically useful, and socially disposable. Every battle consumed dozens, sometimes hundreds of them, and no one ever returned to retrieve their bodies. To die as a Vélite was to vanish. No name in the annals, no tear in the Senate, just one more corpse on the field before the eagles arrived. They knew to fight in front meant not to return, and yet they went. If there was a place where the fate of the Vélites would be sealed forever, it was in the war against Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general who made Rome bleed like never before. During the Second Punic War, Rome watched its armies swallowed at Trebia, crushed at Trasimene, annihilated at Cannae. And who was sent first against the terror descending from the hills? Always them, the Vélites. With little cavalry, Rome pushed its human shields against the Carthaginian elephants. Imagine the sound, bestial trumpets, trembling. Earth javelins hurled against walls of muscle and ivory. Many Vélites died without ever seeing the enemy's sword. They were trampled before the battle even began. But it was then that the generals understood, without this attrition force, no Roman line would survive the first impact. Livy recorded it. They were the first wound and the final breath. Yet Rome remained silent about them. No honor, no monument, nothing. While Hannibal wrote glory, they wrote invisible sacrifice. Rome grew. The borders expanded. The enemies were no longer tribes, but kingdoms. A new army was needed, and with it, a new price. Enter Gaius Marius, the man who destroyed the past to forge the war machine of the future. He abolished wealth divisions, allowing any citizen, who rich or poor, to wield a Roman sword. A masterstroke for the empire. A fatal blow to the Vélites. With the state now providing equipment, the old structure of Hastati, Principes, Triarii, and skirmishers vanished. All soldiers received heavy uniform arms. Tactics shifted. The legion became a solid wall, leaving no place for disposable soldiers. And so, the Vélites dissolved. No revolt, no dagger, no grave. Their role was not forgotten. It was transferred. Foreign auxiliary troops assumed the role of skirmishers, but they received promised citizenship, pay, records. The Vélites, they had none of that. They were the foundation upon which Rome marched to greatness. And like every foundation, they were buried forever. Rome erased them from history, but not from the soil they stained. The end of the Vélites brought no remembrance, only silence, no statue, no name carved in stone, no funeral. History glorified generals, consuls, senators, but ignored those who offered their bodies so victory could exist. Rome rose upon marble columns, but what held it first was a foundation of flesh. The legacy of the Vélites is not in books, It lives in the strategies they made possible, in the organized retreat, the layered attack, the art of weakening the enemy before striking. Every Roman soldier who survived did so because someone before him had fallen. They were the first pain and the final oblivion, the frontier between fear and courage. They proved that not every warrior wears glory. Some wear condemnation. They did not fight for Rome, but in spite of it. And in the end, only one question remains. How many victories rest upon a body that was never counted? You have heard the roar of legions. Now, hear the whisper of those who fought before war had a sound. In the end, the books will remember the generals, but the earth will remember the Velites. They carried no standards. They spoke no speeches before the Senate. They received no laurel crowns. But without them, Rome would never have crossed chaos to reach eternity. They were the living wall between collapse and survival, between retreat and advance. They did not die for honor. They died so others could have it. History wrote, Rome prevailed, but truth whispers they fell first. If there is anything immortal in these forgotten soldiers, it is not their name, it is their gesture. They taught that the greatness of an empire is not found in its triumphs, but in the sacrifices no one sees. While the world celebrates those who reach the summit, few remember those who built the steps. If this remembrance touched you, honor those who never heard applause. Leave your like and stay, because here we give voice to those Rome tried to silence.